Okay, today I'm going to talk about extraordinary claims versus exceptional evidence. Now, we've heard about the smoking gun. It's gotten to be such a cliche, I almost didn't use it in my title. But, you know, it says something, and we understand some things. You know, it's code for a great deal of things. The smoking gun. What does this extraordinary claims versus exceptional evidence mean? I'll explain ultimately what I mean by that at the end of the presentation. But first, let's talk about what things have been said about remote viewing and about psi in general, just very briefly. First off, Dr. Jessica Utz, one of the most prominent statisticians in the United States, UC Davis, was asked to review aspects of the remote viewing program by the CIA to evaluate its worth, see if it was of any use. And this was her conclusion in the report that was finally delivered to the CIA, which they used to justify the termination of the program. Jessica said, using standards applied to any other area of science, in other words, levels of proof or evidence, I want to use that word, levels of evidence that would support the acceptance of any conclusions to any other sort of aspect of science, she concluded that psychic functioning had been well established. That is a gentle way of saying psi effects are real, based on the evidence she had access to, all right? In that same report, the AIR, this might even been Ray Hyman, said, remote viewing has no real value for intelligence operations. At another point in the report, it said, remote viewing had never been used successfully, I'm paraphrasing here, had never been used successfully to conduct intelligence operations. Okay, well, she says it's been proved essentially, and they say it hasn't been proved essentially, to be very general about it. There's a fight going on. And some of it was contributed to by Marcello Truzzi. Now, most people think that this phrase, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and you hear it phrased various ways, but this is the one formulation I decided on. Most people today think Carl Sagan coined that phrase. As far as I can tell, and Marcello tells me himself, he's the one that coined it like about 25 years ago, and it caught on so well that nobody knows who said it, but Carl Sagan said it so many times that they think he's the author of it. Okay, Daryl, you have any input on that?
Yes, Marcello said it.
Okay, good.
Unless you think David Hume said it.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Marcello, before his death, had always hoped to write an article where he said he no longer believes it.
Okay, Daryl Bem says that, in fact, you could Marcello did say it first, but you could actually trace it back to David Hume, who, of course, was a philosopher back in the early modern period, and that's true. And a further, more interesting thing that Daryl said is that Marcello said before his death that he no longer believes that to be the case.
Well, he thinks it leads to internal contradiction.
He thinks it leads to internal contradiction. That's right. In an article I wrote that was published in an intelligence periodical, and then we reprinted in modified form in Aperture, I note that this is really a psychological requirement of humans. It's not necessarily any kind of real scientific requirement, okay? And in fact, that, by the way, I have pictures of Marcello. Some of you may not know. He was an advisor to IRVA, passed away from cancer just last year, I believe it was, last winter, if I'm not mistaken, which is sad. He's a great loss to the community. But he is the one that gets credit for this phrase, at least in modern times, okay? So, proof is proof is proof. That was my original argument. Extraordinary proof, there's no such thing in science as extraordinary proof. That's a human valuation. If something is evidence for one thing, that same sort of evidence for another phenomenon ought to be of equivalent value. And that we only psychologically require to have some kind of exceptional evidence to support some kind of claim that we think is exceptional as well. So if someone claims, yes, I can read your mind, you want to know what proof he has for that, and it can't just be that he successfully tells you that you had eggs for breakfast. You could guess that, right? Okay, that's not exceptional proof. That's not extraordinary proof. There's a reason I'm mincing these words here. That's not extraordinary proof. We want something that really tells us, reconfirms that this claim that we think is so outlandish really is true. Okay, so what does this go to? Why do people feel there's a need for extraordinary proof? And I'm going to argue that Marcello actually against Marcello in this case. I think in claims of paranormal sorts of things, extraordinary proof, however we want to define that, really is actually necessary. I've changed my opinion on that from thinking that it's just a psychology game to thinking there's something actually necessary there. You do have to provide more evidence for an unusual or extraordinary claim. And why is that? Okay, first off, why extraordinary proof? Because there's always a possibility of deception or mistakes when you're making a claim that is outside of the norm, okay? There can be fraud, and there has been many times fraud in parapsychology research. There can be faulty analysis. People make mistakes, and this is, I shouldn't limit this just to parapsychology research. In mainstream science, there's been fraud, quite a lot of it. In mainstream science, there's been faulty analysis, quite a lot of it. In mainstream science, there's been experimental flaws. It applies to parapsychology and to regular science as well. And so, in a way, actually, I'm arguing against myself because it would seem like then you would want to demand extraordinary proof for scientific claims as well. But the next thing is what makes it important, and that's the context of what is known to be true is how we evaluate new claims. Okay? All kinds of complex philosophical arguments involved in this, but what it boils down to is no human knows everything and no human can know everything. No group of humans can know everything. And as a consequence, you end up with big holes in your knowledge base. How we evaluate if something is true or not, a claim that we make is true or not, is how well it fits or coheres with other things that we have high confidence in being true. So if you come along with a claim that is at odds with all the other things you know, or many of them, you're going to be less likely to want to accept that, and you're going to have much better reasons for wanting to know why you should accept this weird claim that you hear. Now, presumably, if you get that much better evidence and you finally can figure out how it fits into your knowledge base, then you'll accept it. But a lot of times, and we heard, I don't know if it was you, Daryl, or if it was Melvin, I forget. One of you said, well, I think it was you. You said that Ray Hyman has privately said that no amount of truth would convince him, or no amount of evidence would convince him. And there's a reason for that. It's because so far, we don't have a causal mechanism for parapsychological effects, including remote viewing or any of these other things. We don't know what makes it work. And if we don't know what makes it work, we can't fit it into this great context of science that we have. And if we can't fit into that context of science, we don't have that coherence. And so you can show all kinds of evidence, but gosh, that doesn't make sense to me. You know, you get confused. And of course, speaking for science as a whole, it doesn't act like an individual person, but individual people, if they come up with something that seems to run counter cherished beliefs for a long time, they have, I can't think of the word for it, cognitive dissonance. They develop cognitive dissonance, and they have a hard time dealing with that outlier piece of information. Okay, quick questions I'll go for. Yes? Okay. Okay, so Randy has been debated on this, and okay. Okay. Okay, good. All right, good. I won't try and repeat that. Okay. Okay, good. But there is a very good reason why science doesn't accept these claims. It's because it doesn't cohere with the rest of things that are known to be true, at least as they're known to be true now. Now, we had a couple examples earlier. Melvin Morse gave one, how things were dismissed because it didn't fit in with what people believed. This is the paradigm thing that Thomas Kuhn talked about. Okay. But later on, when we knew more and it made sense, then it fit, and then it was accepted. And, you know, we all hold out hope that that'll happen with this. But based on what we know now, I think that claims for extraordinary evidence, extraordinary proof, are fair from the scientific establishment. Now, some of them don't play by their own rules, but that's a different matter. That's a different issue. Okay, good. I have beat that horse very dead, and we're going to talk about a horse in a minute. Okay, so here are some of the requirements for something to be accepted by science. And none of these aren't all universal, and there are arguments about all of these. But in general, most people are comfortable with talking about this. Replicability, first one here. That means you can repeat an experiment. Okay, that just one person in one lab doesn't keep getting the same results and nobody else can duplicate them, because then you start wondering what's going on. If nobody else can do it, you have to wonder if it's really an effect or some kind of artifact, or if that person's trying to pull something on people, trying to bamboozle people. So it has to be replicable, and not just by the same folks. Other people have to be able to repeat it as well. The effect has to have some robustness to it, or at least you have to understand why that robustness isn't there. It's got to be a significant effect that persists and continues to manifest itself. Reproducibility is kind of like replicability, but I distinguish between these things in this respect. Reproducibility means it's going to work in August, and it's going to work in December, and it's going to work 10 years later. It's not something that just stops working. There's something fishy about an effect that works for a little while and then doesn't work anymore later on. Okay, and finally, falsifiability. This is famously from, oh gosh, I'm having a brain cramp. Karl Hopper. Said that to be truly scientific, you have to have a theory. Your theory has to be able to be tested, and it has to be vulnerable to falsification, because if you try and falsify it and it survives the test, then it can be accepted as real. But if it's a theory you can't even test, you can't accept it as scientific. This is, people who get into philosophy of science realize Hopper actually wasn't necessarily right about this, because there are some things that are fully acceptable in science that you can't necessarily test in the way he was talking about. But nonetheless, this is still generally a criterion that people accept. Okay, so here's an example of a problem with people believing that things were going on when they really weren't. A horse named Clever Hans. He's famous. You see him in almost all the psychology books, okay? Because what this horse could do is do math. He could add, he could subtract, he could divide, multiply. He could even do square roots. Now, I can't do square roots. But this horse could do square roots, and he usually got it right. But people couldn't figure out, no horse can do math, what's the story here? And he was investigated over and over and over again, trying to figure out what it was. Finally, eventually, somebody figured it out. What was happening was the horse wasn't doing any math at all. He was a great student of human psychology, okay? And he understood nonverbal communications exquisitely well. And if he could not do math if there was no one in his field of view who knew the answer to the question. He could not do math he could do math, but he'd always get the wrong answer if the people in front of him were incompetent and got the wrong answer themselves, okay? It turned out what the horse was doing is watching people, and so they'd give it a question, what's 5 and 7? And he'd stamp his foot 12 times, and when he saw people relax and kind of feel, he got to the answer, they changed their body posture, he stopped. And they'd say, man, that horse counted to 12, that's amazing, okay? There was no fraud going on here. It was his trainer was showing that he didn't know this was happening. He really thought the horse could do math too. No one's trying to put anything over anybody, but their analysis was faulty and the experiments they used were faulty up to a certain point, okay? And there are cases in parapsychology research where you have something similar going on to this in I guess, an analogical sort of a way. Okay, so how do we determine when some kind of effect actually is an effect? Well, we talk about statistical significance, okay? And what that means roughly, and I hope I don't get this wrong, is that the chances of that thing happening that you're testing for, happening by accident, are lower than a certain percentage. And the generally accepted percentage is 0.5 or 1 in 20 chance. Is that right? Have I got that right? You got it right on the slide. 0.05. What did I say? Oh, yes, okay. I meant 0.05, but I'm starting to panic now. No, okay. Okay, so that's generally accepted statistical significance. Now, here's the problem. When you start talking about extraordinary evidence, you start talking about what they call severe tests. Now, there's a philosopher of science, I've forgotten her name at the moment, who has focused on this idea of severe tests. She proposes that not all statistical significance is equal. What might be sufficiently statistically significant in one case is nowhere near enough in other cases. And what kinds of things might you want to know with more certainty? What things might you want to be more statistically significant than others if you were making decisions? Any ideas? Think about your own lives. This is audience response. Huh? Health. Okay, give me an example. Oh, okay, so science wants to validate it. You want it to be really validated before you, okay. Okay, so you want the best one, and the one that's most statistically significant might be the best. Yes?
More important decisions.
More important decisions. Decisions that something more important hangs on, okay? What you have for breakfast you're not going to lay nearly as much weight on as what car you're going to buy. Now that you don't evaluate statistically, but that's kind of an analogy to tie this in. Did I see another hand? I thought I saw another hand. Yes?
What we mean by extraordinary proof
Uh-huh.
actually means that we require a smaller significance level than 0.05.
Right.
The claim of ESP, for example, or
Uh-huh.
even people in psychology would say, well, it has to be 0.05 level, we need 0.01.
Yes. That's the idea. And that's in our lives we do this too. You know, if there's a possibility of endangering life and limb or costing us a lot of money or the rewards are much greater, we want more certainty about that just in our lives. And science is just like that. It wants more certainty about the evidence. And that's what they are talking about when they say extraordinary proof or extraordinary evidence, okay? So I'm going to talk about very briefly about these first parts, because we're interested in remote viewing, and I'm not going to really get into this too much. But there have been a number of experimental paradigms that have consistently provided pretty high levels of statistical significance, okay? One is during experiments. Rupert Sheldrake is working on this. The literature on this is a little bit uneven, but there are some very interesting results in some of the experiments that seem to be pretty good. And there are high levels. What this is determining on whether someone can determine they're being stared at or not. You know, you've all had the feeling you're being stared at and you turn around and you really are, right? Well, at least the most beautiful ones in the audience have that experience. The rest of us, they tend not to stare at me. Anyway, okay, so they've set up an experiment where you have someone in a closed room, closed circuit TV. This is one model. They're sitting there and they're supposed to push a key when they think they're being looked at, and not when they're not being looked at. And then they average the results. How many times were they right? How many times were they wrong? And they come up with a statistical significance factor. And many of those have had some pretty high significance ratings, okay? That's one paradigm. Now, there's the Gonsfeld experiments that we've heard about. And I've got a picture of Gonsfeld, and it looks so weird I had to include these here, okay? So you have Gonsfeld, and it's where you have somebody in a isolation chamber. They have ping pong balls over their eyes, as you can see here. They're bathed in this pinkish light. They've got headphones on, white noise. Actually, I think it's pink noise, if I remember right. Whatever it is. Anyway, going in the ears. And then they're trying to visualize what the target is out of a set of 4 that someone in a different room is sending to them. Now, this is a general, there's lots of variations on this theme, but a general notion of this. And then at the end, they get to, like you guys did with the ARV experiment, they get to see the target set and they pick which one they think they best described. And then you can crunch the statistics on that. How many times were a certain set of participants successful in identifying the correct picture, you know, versus how many they should have gotten, and so on. And there's been some very high statistical significant outcomes on these too, right? I'm going to keep putting you on the spot. 1 in a billion. And let me think, a billion is how many zeros? 10 to the minus 9th. So that's 0.9 or 10 zeros, 9 zeros, and a 1. See, exponentials always got me messed up. So, okay. And that definitely meets most people's criterion of statistical significance. There are still doubters, are there not? Okay. Huh? Yes. Okay, Ray Hyman, and I've heard him say that, or at least read him saying that. Darrell Bim says that Ray Hyman accepts that something other than chance is happening. But he's notorious. He doesn't overtly say this, but it's clear, you're reading between the lines, that he suspects fraud is the case in many of these cases. But he at the very least suspects that statistical significance or experimental design flaws accounts for these things. He continually says, we got to wait and see, because we're bound to find out there are flaws in the experiment. Well, the first time he said that I found was like about 1983 or something like that. And we've been waiting, and so far some of these experiments haven't shown any flaws. Flaws that were pointed out turn out not to be flaws. Now, there are experiments where flaws are determined, but there are some that are very good, and so far they have not found holes in them. At least that's my assessment. Okay. So then you choose between the 4 targets. These aren't really good targets for a Gonsfeld, but it gives you the idea. You've got target pool you select a target from. Okay. There's the presentiment experiments, which I believe we've talked about here a little bit too. The leader in this is Dean Radin, but other people have replicated them. That's the idea where they show you a set of pictures, either emotionally soothing ones or calming or arousing ones. Now, I didn't want to put the ones they actually use on the screen because some of them are X-rated, but I thought these were tasteful enough, right? Okay. And the idea is that these are presented on a screen in a random fashion, and then they measure, let's see, I'll get this going. They measure some of your autonomic functions. There's a wire that goes I don't know where over here, hooked onto something. Measure your autonomic functions, and the idea is that a certain amount of time before you actually see one of these arousing pictures, certain body indicators go up unconsciously to you, and then that you're unconscious of. And there does seem to be some pretty strong statistically significant effects from those. So here's, I guess that's calming, and the snake was supposed to be arousing. I don't know. Pretty tame snake, or pretty tame picture. Okay, so enough of all of that stuff. Before I go on, anybody confused? Do you know what I'm trying to get at here? Okay, good. No response is an indicator of good progress. Okay, so let's talk about remote viewing experiments. And I'll tell you right now, the entire rest of this program is going to be me showing you one right after the other. And I'm hoping you're not bored, but if you are, let me know, and I'll dismiss you with a note to the office. Anyway, okay, good. So, first one I'm going to show you, Outbounder, 2 November 2003. Now let me tell you how I'm going to do this. First of all, I'm going to, if I have a session number, I'm going to put it up here. I'm going to put the date if I know it. I'm going to put what the protocol is. This is very simple. If it's double blind, if it's single blind, if there's a monitor involved, if there's not, if it's solo, whatever. Method used, and viewer, if I know who that is, okay? So here's the first one. You can see what the stats are on, or the information on that. And I'm not going to talk you through all these because that would go on ad nauseum. It's worse than hearing somebody's dream, okay? But you can see it gets started off. There's a structure involved. I hit some interesting dimensionals and stuff. I already gave it away who I was, okay? You get this kind of starting to sketching, kind of a hexagonal or a polygonal shape. And then I get this. Okay, based on this, what is this target? Lighthouse. So, prepared to be wrong. We found out that it was, in fact, a lighthouse. Okay? So that's interesting. Okay? Uh-oh. This thing is making a lot of noise. You could devise an experiment that would provide the opportunity to counter what your theory is. So the idea is like, if you go for the white crow thing, right? We'll go with that because everybody knows that. All crows are black, right? If you find one white crow, you've disproved the theory that all crows are black. And whether or not crows are all black is a theory. Unless you can observe every instance of a crow, you can only theorize that all crows are black based on every crow you've ever seen is black, all right? But if you find one white crow, you've disproved the theory. Okay? Yes, go ahead.
The way I often introduce it to students is
okay.
My aunt has a parakeet.
Okay, hold it a second. Let me get you the mic. This sounds like a fun story.
What you need to do is illustrate with one which is not a theory.
Okay, good.
My aunt has a parakeet. It gets ill. She prays for it, and the bird gets better. And I ask her why. She said because it was God's will. The parakeet gets sick. She prays for it. It dies. I ask her why did it die. She says it was God's will. Now, I'm not making fun of her religious belief, but the religious belief is a metaphysical, not a real theory, because it explains everything and hence explains nothing. In other words, her theory that God's will is involved cannot be falsified because there is no empirical outcome that she could describe, even in principle, that would lead her to change her belief and say it is false. And according to Popper, then, it is not an empirical theory because it cannot be falsified. And the reason that's an important criterion is because if you ask people, why do you believe God exists? They can cite many, many things that leads them to believe that. The real trick, the one that presses them against the wall, is what observation could you make that would lead you to conclude you are wrong? And so to make sure I'm not making fun of people with religion, the atheist is in exactly the same position. Yeah. The atheist who says God does not exist, and you say why, they can give you lots of reasons. Look at all the suffering in the world, all of that. The real trick is, tell me what you could observe that would lead you to believe that you are wrong.
Memory thing.
And if you can do that, then you are holding an empirical theory which is falsifiable. So the hard criterion is not to come up with things that would support your theory, but to explain in principle what observation you could make that would show that you're wrong. And that's why that's the important criterion. And what he was trying to distinguish was metaphysical propositions, which are propositions that can be neither shown, proved nor disproved, from empirical propositions. And so if you cannot be wrong, you don't have a theory. And that's the major distinction that people make on that. Okay. Well, I'm not going to give my Psych 101 lecture, but it's one that comes up all the time.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay, good. Dick, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that just went by real fast.
Yeah, okay, good, thanks. I might as well get more questions out of the way, as we're not doing anything else right now. Any other questions, guys? So was that very rough philosophy of science stuff putting you to sleep?
Well, I guess,
Yes.
did you do any demonstrations in front of Congress?
Yes.
Were they ever convinced by?
Yes. I'll tell you that story if you want.
Yeah.
Okay. It was in, I'm trying to think of the month. I think it was May of 1990. We had been, this is history. Anybody be put to sleep by history? Okay, because it's a war story. Those are usually fun. No guts and glory, but anyway, it's still a war story. The remote viewing unit had been task organized over to the Department of the Army for a roughly 1 year period. We've been working for DIA. Our enemies were really hammering us, and there was some question that things weren't going the way they ought to go and all that kind of stuff. And they're about to destroy the program, essentially. And the Department of the Army, for various reasons, said, well, we want to try him out. We're going to try him on the counter-narcotics problem. And the colonel that took us over, he was a skeptic, but he wanted to give us a fair chance, so he actually worked us on this project. He took us on the project, but he needed to sell it to get some funds to actually make it work. So he set up a meeting with Bill Cohen, who at the time was a senator, became Secretary of Defense under Clinton, Daniel Inouye, John Glenn, who's the fourth one? I'll think of it in a second. John Glenn, Daniel Inouye, oh, and Rudman. What was Rudman's first name? I'm sorry? Warren Rudman, okay. And we went in there, and they set up a demonstration, and Cohen picked a target. And didn't tell anybody what it was, didn't tell Johnson, that was the colonel's name, Colonel Johnson, what it was. And this is Gabi Pettengill, some of you knew Gabi. She was the viewer. I was the monitor. We sat down. Cohen passes on this piece of paper, some number on it. It wasn't even a coherent coordinate, I don't think. It was just an arbitrary number. Passes it on. I give the number to Gabi, and she goes through the CRV process that we were using at the time there, and starts describing this structure, factory-like structure out in the middle of the desert, and had some really noxious fumes about it, and she felt it was dangerous and that the substances that were produced there were not something you want to have anything to do with. And after some iterations of these for a while, Cohen says, okay, that's good enough. And it turned out the target he had given us was Rabta, the Libyan chemical weapons plant at Rabta. And those 4 senators were persuaded by that, because they knew we could not possibly know what the target was. They also knew that our target set was essentially infinite, and yet we had described accurately, it turned out, what the selected target had been. So that was one instance. There are other instances, but that was the one instance that I had anything to do with, okay? Oh, yeah. Yeah, you beat Angela good. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's good or not, but okay, the plug-in's over on the far side. Okay, other questions? Yes?
That's an interesting story because I happened to hear Senator Inouye.
Oh, good. And you know how to say his name right, and I don't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, say that again. You interviewed him?
I interviewed.
Why don't you come up here?
So you did a remote viewing for Senator Inouye that was
Yeah.
unambiguous, and it was a
Yes.
wow, knock his socks
Yes.
off, and he saw that.
Well, I didn't get feedback directly from him, but Cohen was impressed. So, and Glenn seemed to be too. So.
I interviewed Senator Inouye. I'm a television reporter in Hawaii, and I knew that he was on the Intelligence
it's on an
Committee and
iStick,
had
and XP
seen
seems to
evidence like
recognize
this.
iSticks,
So it was at the dedication of the Spark Matsunaga Veterans Center, just a ho-hum type of story where Senator Inouye was there, and he was making some very general comments, and I had him in front of a TV camera, and I said, Senator Inouye, on a different subject, can I ask you a question about remote viewing? And I have this tape, and he said, I watched, he gave me this look that could kill, just like, yes. And I asked him, did you ever witness anything? I know you were on the Intelligence Committee. And he kind of hemmed and hawed and said, you know, when you get into this talk of psychic, it makes people very uncomfortable. And he really kind of sort of wouldn't admit it. But he said there were some interesting things that we couldn't explain, but he really didn't want to talk about that. So it's interesting to me that you did that demonstration for him.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Quasi-feedback. I love any kind of feedback. Of course, that's what a viewer lives for. Okay, we're loading here. We're very close to hopefully being back online. Wonders of modern technology. Microsoft giveth and Microsoft taketh away. Yes, a question, yes.
I know that maybe part of the
Yeah, why don't you talk on the mic? Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe part of the reason for the sort of downfall or negative review of remote viewing in the unit was somehow it seems to have gotten associated with the old MK Ultra business. Is that true or not? I mean,
No.
it seems like there were a lot of things the CIA was doing which were maybe not so ethical, and somehow there was connection.
That we got smeared with that brush. Well, this is before my time, so I still say we. In '75, with the church committee hearings and all that stuff, they brought in. Let me think now. Who was the was it Colby that was the CIA director at the time? Anyway, he came in to clean house, and he said, "You do anything weird, obnoxious, controversial, that's going to embarrass us, get rid of it." And they were funding remote viewing at the time, and that was one of the things that one of the factors that played into remote viewing being done away with. But that was the only even close connection to MK Ultra. They weren't worried about so-called mind control issues, particularly since we were very careful about making sure our human use charter was up to date. Whatever Department of the Army Council said, and later on whatever DoD Council said we had to do as far as human use, that is experimenting on human subjects, we made sure that we had our ducks in a row on that. And so they weren't too worried about that part of it, okay? Yes, another question. Is this a microphone question? Whatever, we'll get it on the tape. You'd be famous for 2 minutes here.
I had seen a piece on, is it David Moorhead?
Morehouse, isn't it?
Morehouse,
Yeah.
David Morehouse. And at the end of the piece, they made a comment that they had shut down the remote viewing program. And then they said that although they had remote viewers remotely view the shutdown, and that it had gone to some kind of a black op, and that it was more...
Sorry, I had to check on the, say
I'm
that
sorry, it
last
was
part.
more for public consumption that they had shut down.
Oh, and that it's gone deep
And that it had
under
gone
the
deeper
basement of language
as
or
a
something.
black op.
Okay,
if you had any comment.
I answer this a lot. My opinion is that there is a 90% chance the remote viewing program really is dead. There's only a 10%, and this is ballpark roughly. I think there's only a 10% chance roughly that it is some covert operation now being conducted on it. And the reason is because of the kind of people that run bureaucratic government agencies. They're all left-brainers. They like to have things pigeonholed. They don't like things that don't have closure. They don't like things that are open-ended. They don't like ambiguity, okay? And in fact, there's been some forward thinkers, but at the time the remote viewing program was canceled, John Deutsch was director of CIA, and he had already kicked Dale Graff and Jack Verona out of his office once for trying to tell him about remote viewing. He did not want to have anything to do with it, and I am convinced that he had played a major role in the demise of remote viewing at that time. The problem is, of course, those are the sorts of people that gravitate towards the top of these organizations because they are team players, they follow the rules pretty much, they integrate well with the establishment, they're linear thinkers for the most part, and those are just the opposite types of people that want to support a remote viewing program that might be embarrassing, that might be vague, might be ambiguous in some of the results, might get them in trouble in some way or other. And so that's why I don't think the government is doing it. Now, when I say that, it's possible at some lower level, some informal program, you know, you've got a lot of agents, CIA, FBI, those folks out there who have intelligence contingency funds. They have money to pay sources, and they have some discretion over what sources they pay. And so they might say, you know, I'm going to try this. So they'll look through, they'll find someone who they think they can trust as a psychic or remote viewer. They may even hire them and get them to do some stuff, and that might get injected in the system. But that's not the government doing it. Sure, it's a government agent, but it's no kind of official program. It's kind of an ad hoc sort of a thing. Is it not recognizing the program?
It's a little short on memory, so it's...
Okay. So shall we turn Angela's on too, just in case? Okay. Are we running out of questions? I hope not, because we're still not there. Yes, Glenn. Do you want the mic? Okay. Did we follow the same rules as the rest of the intelligence community that are actually collecting? Are you talking about U.S. persons, that kind of stuff? Okay.
Yeah, AOL keeps starting.
Well, I mean, of course, that depends on your modality. Did we follow the general rules of being a spy? Well, it depends if you're a SIG-inter, if you're human intelligence, or that kind of thing. Those rules change. But generic rules such as you don't spy on U.S. persons without court order or act of Congress, yes. Well, but I'm answering it. We did follow those rules, okay? Now, exceptions were, you know, like, for example, we had a target that was Mother Teresa. But in fact, those executive orders allow you to maintain dossiers on people who are public figures, okay? Dale Graff in his book wrote about, yes, and we had authorization for that. I'm sorry? Okay, we did address the Charles Frank Jordan case, and what did you say? Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm just looking to see how it works.
Yeah. And my answer is yes, we did follow those same rules. If there were any exceptions, they were the same kind of exceptions other people make. But for the most part, we did. You know, we had constant oversight, congressional oversight. We had IGs coming in, checking things out. We had all kinds of stuff going on. Okay. Well, yellow fruit, yeah, we don't want to talk about that. That's too much to explain. But we didn't have anything to do with that. We didn't have anything to do with that. We just got, again, tarred by somebody else's brush there. Yeah. Charles Frank Jordan, yeah. We were asked by, who was doing that? Customs, I think, was the lead on that. We were asked by Customs to address that case. You know, I don't know what they did, but they were comfortable enough about it that they went on public record that they had done that. So I suspect they went through the wickets. Probably got some kind of court, either that or they had some posse comitatus thing or something that allowed them to do that. Okay? That's the only answer I can give you. Dale Graff might be able to tell you better, but Dale, he's getting old, he's married. No, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, are we up yet? I spoke too soon about modern technology. Microsoft is still getting us. Yes, we have another question here. Do you want a mic for this question? Why not? It's close. It's free. It's tangled up. Just come closer. Come closer. Okay, there you go.
I just wondered if you know what technique, was like CRV, or what technique or methodologies Pat Price used.
Pat Price used his own methodologies. He did not, in fact, I don't know if you can even call it a method. The interesting thing, and people often make a mistake about, is thinking that one kind or another of remote viewing is all there is, and there is nothing else. You have to remember that the first remote viewers, some of whom were more successful than virtually all, I won't say all, but virtually all remote viewers today, didn't really have a method. They did it intuitively. They did it in a certain way. And of course, that, as Joe McMoneagle has famously pointed out, it's the protocol that counts in that case that make it a remote viewing, okay? Price just did it. You know, no one exactly knows how he did it. I've asked Hal this question, Hal put off this question, because he worked a lot with him. And Hal said, hey, he just did it. You know, and Engel, when he first got involved in it, he was just doing it. He didn't really have a methodology. CRV was developed to try and capture the sorts of things in general that those kind of pioneer remote viewers went through to arrive at where they're going. Added the research that was known at that time about, you know, the split brain research, the perceptual research that was known at that time. And it's surprising how many things they got right on this that even hold up today, given some of the science research in human perception and that sort of stuff that we now know that we didn't know 20 years ago, okay? So, I don't know, that's the best answer. Yes? You on the mic?
No, I'm going to hit F7 and then...
So can you detect it? I can say no, but I don't know the answer to that. So far, I know of no way that has been found that you can do that. Now, you hear stories, like Joe McMonagle says he ran into a remote viewer out there in the ether somewhere. Other people tell stories. But see, those are anecdotes. And you don't know if it's overlay or not because you don't have any evidence they really did meet a remote viewer out there. You don't find the remote viewer that says, oh yeah, I ran into Joe out there, independent corroboration. You don't have that. So did he meet somebody out there? It's quite possible, but there's no consistent reports of this. There's no way of verifying. We don't know if you can detect a remote viewer or not, okay? Or if you can even defend against them. Evidence seems no. I see, for example, Melvin Morse's talk, he's talking about non-locality, non-local consciousness. Whether non-local consciousness exists or not is still a great debate. It hasn't even reached theory status yet. But it does seem to be a nice answer to how this may work. Of course, nobody knows how non-locality works, so that's an answer without an answer in a way. Maybe that's the solution, but if it is non-local, then it doesn't seem that you could stop that in any way. Okay. All right. Questions? Yes. Studies on adverse effects over time. Not formal studies, but we had staff psychologists at Fort Meade who had they also had access to the SRI folks. So roughly 20 to 23 years of experiential history showed that remote viewing didn't seem to have adverse effects physically or mentally. Socially, maybe. In fact, when we were recruited for the program, we were allowed to tell our spouses very general things about what we were getting engaged in because the worry was that we would change and our philosophies change, maybe our personalities change a little bit based on the things we were learning and experiencing, and that could trouble our most intimate relationships. And so we were able to make our spouses witting very informally and probably somewhat illegally, but we were allowed to do that, okay? We were also warned that it could have adverse effects on our careers. So, interestingly enough, it really didn't. Okay, it didn't, except in the fact that we didn't do the normal due course kinds of things that military officers and DOD civilians might do, and so that might hurt your career. I didn't get a command, for example, so I didn't get promoted to lieutenant colonel. And they told me that. You didn't have a command when you're captain, you're never going to make 05, okay? And so that was a danger, but it's a risk you accept because of what you get to do. And I wouldn't trade that. I'd retire as a sergeant if it came to that, because of that. I got a question.
Okay, now, again, trying to...
Group pair, group consciousness being powerful. Concurrent viewing, getting more accurate. Yes, there is evidence of that. There's evidence of concurrent viewing actually having a building effect, and there's evidence of having a destructive effect as well. I mean, destructive in the sense of the session going to heck, Yeah, interference, yeah, or contamination or whatever. SRI did some of this concurrent research, shows up in their 1975 report to the CIA, in which they found that done right, they were getting better results from group viewers. I mean, not done as a group, but consensus reporting, I guess, or whatever. I'm not quite sure what the right term is here. They were getting better results that way because they were able to discriminate through error elimination types of protocols, get rid of some of the stuff that didn't fit and add some of the stuff. It's kind of, in a way, like what Dick Allgaier was showing us in his presentation on analysis, okay? But there's also cases where you get contaminated telepathic overlay or whatever, and what would have been good just goes to pot, okay? So now we're up, we got 3 computers going and none of them are working, right?
Ready to go.
This one's running. Okay, good. Okay, all right. So are we on the screen? We're on the screen. Okay, good. Are we ready? Okay, you guys are going to have to make the decision because I'm presenting, okay? When you come up and say, huh? Yes, sir, okay. Hey, I don't outrank you, Bill. In fact, no, I'm not stopping now. Okay, good. Okay, what is this one? This is, all right, we'll run through this. I'm going to hit these quick. I showed you, oh yes, there's the viewer on this one. Okay. I was a child once, I'm no longer, okay? This is the second one, and this was done, okay, this is still the lighthouse one. This was done by Sita. I didn't have a picture of her with me, so I couldn't put it up. Sorry, guys, okay? She was an HRVG viewer, also did a good job on this. About, I don't know if Steven's in here, maybe he knows, I'd say about 10 or 12 viewers got Lighthouse or something very close to it in that particular, and most of these guys are just, trying it for the first time. It was a very successful outbounder. Okay, so let's do this one, 12 June 2004, various methodologies, various viewers. Here's one. Anybody recognize that? Okay. Note they've got this circular thing with water around the outside and vegetation around the inside. All kinds of, I'm not going to go through most of the words because it takes a while to do that. But you get pavement, vegetation, so forth and so on. This is a more interesting one. You see you've got this pattern around here, rows of trees. Okay. So, you guys know what this one is, right? And you see you've got that, the little island out here, the curving lake. You saw that yesterday in the video. Okay. So that's pretty good. Let me find my page up again. You can see the comparison, and then you can see the feedback, and then you can see the guy that did it. I did have a picture of Dick. Okay, good. Okay, here's another one. This is Wayne Carr's. You can see that he got water park, and you can understand how that analysis might get in there because it's water, contained water, and that kind of thing. But you see the patterns in the sketching, he got it pretty darn well. It's a pretty good session here. Another one of this, I think, oh shoot, I've forgotten the name of the person that did this. Chesterfield, maybe? Are you here? I think it's Chesterfield is the name of the guy that did this. There you are. Okay, good job. You see some AOL getting in here, but you see the basic notion is there as well. Okay, so that was good. We were not in a boat, although that would have been nice. Okay, a canoe with a little guitar. I don't know, it wasn't like that. Okay, here's another one. Now this one, unfortunately, the pen wasn't too dark, but you sort of see that they got the feel for this too, and I don't know who did this one, unless it's Marcia Nolte or something like that. You've got the round, the trees, the water, kind of a walkway sort of a thing here. So you see that they're getting impressions that sort of tied in with the target. This was interesting. This was Lance Daniels, right? Okay. This was a little sketch he did down in the corner. And when he showed it to me, he said, well, I don't know what's going on here. This is not very good. But the rest of it, I got some good stuff. Well, frankly, this was the best part of his session, and he didn't know it. Because I'll show you what else was there. Flag, walkway. I think I put the two together. Let me see. Yeah. Okay, look. It's got the walkway right here, the edge, and the flag's just off the edge in the lawn, right? The flagpole. I don't know. I guess he thought those were lights. It could have been lights or it could have been the people. Who knows? You got the curve with the little crosses there, okay? He probably thought that was something else. His left brain was telling him something. I don't know. Are you here, Lance? I heard you. What did you think you were getting with this? Uh-huh. Hold it. Run up here. We don't have a lot of time to do the mic thing, so if you're going to get on the mic, do it quick, okay?
Stephen Schwartz was mushing us along really quickly, and he said, look for another significant object in the area. I know you were all there. And so I saw that right there, and I was trying to draw it as fast as I can before I moved to the next thing. So, I saw this flag, I saw the curve, I saw that. So,
and what were you thinking it was?
A flagpole.
No, I mean, what about this, though?
This, I wasn't sure what that was on the bottom.
Okay, so you weren't committed on that. You just, it was a pattern that felt right, you didn't know what it was.
Right, I was just looking at it from that perspective.
Good, that's good. Thank you. Okay, now, several people got this idea of this thing that was rectangular and had these bars across it, and that was the thing I leaned down on and was playing in the water off of. At least, I mean, that matched the pattern that they got anyway. It's hard to say it really was the thing they were perceiving. Who knows, right? But at least there was a match there with that, okay? And here's another shot. Somebody drew a sketch of that darn dock. It was identical to the dock. I was really impressed with that. I didn't have time to scan it in, and I was doing this at 2 this morning, so I got the best I could with it. And, of course, our illustrious leader. She's not in here. Oh, well. Oh, yes, she is. Oh, she's hiding, yes. I wanted to show you that she was doing all the work as usual, okay, and doing a fantastic job of it, too, I might add. Okay, so here's another session. This in 2001, double-blind solo, CRV, cleave. Most of these are going to be CRV type sessions because that's what I teach, and I've culled these from my students over the years. I didn't start actually collecting sessions until about 2000. I have a few from before that. So most of these are from a smaller set of people and not as many as I've had over the years, but these will give you an idea. Okay, cleave. I'm not going to go through this stuff because we're short on time. I'll kind of cut to the chase. He starts doing these sketches. He comes up with this sketch, all right? The idea is, in fact, we have a summary here. Why don't you read for us what he says?
Sure, it says, the target is a structure on water. He has curving, sloping, conical, sweeping, sloped, curved surfaces, which are floating, bobbing, rocking, heaving, and swaying in water. The water is cool, silver, shimmering, reflecting, dappled with lapping waves. People were present. Afternoon or morning sun under a reddish sky near the sun. Blue,
etc.
Okay.
Those kind of ambient things we don't need. Go ahead.
Okay, lots of objects on a flat moving surface, colors present, blue, green, yellow,
Yeah, don't worry
red,
about those.
yellow, green, blah, blah, blah.
Don't worry
Do you want
about
the
that.
AOLs?
No, don't worry about
Okay.
those.
Down birds, fish. Okay, the last paragraph.
Okay, go to the last paragraph.
Drawing
let's-
produced structure on water between sandy shores having a
Stanchioned.
stanchient metallic structure surrounding the main flat structure.
Like a railing, he
Like a
says.
railing. Objects on the flat structure were boxes and cylinders, gave an aesthetic impact of, makes me feel like I'm on a boat.
Now, we had some AOL going in this one. And anybody here not know what I mean when I say AOL? Analytic overlay, okay. If you do, you're out of luck. Oh, if you don't, you're out of luck. Okay, this was the target. Okay, so you can see where he had the raw perception of this, but his left brain was trying to put it together in a certain way, all right? That's kind of pretty interesting how he did it, I thought. It shows he was on target, but was mistaken about some of the aspects of it, okay? And there's picture Cleve. I'm showing these pictures so you can see they're kind of ordinary folks. Cleve wouldn't like to think he's ordinary, but he is. No, okay, just kidding. This was in 2000, blind and monitored, CRV stage 3. Joseph was the viewer. Okay, what's the target? Can you tell? That's right. He went on and beat this thing to a pulp. He got a panoramic view, breathtaking, that was correct. He's got, trying to figure out how the water and the land come together. He's got this idea, and then his final sketch, a different view of this waterfall. Then he says, I'll just go down here to the bottom. The rushing sound gives the impression of a waterfall that is part of a river. Oh, I forgot I even spelled that out. We won't worry about it. That was the target. Okay? And so you see the comparison, and you see Joseph. Okay? Another one. Is this boring you yet? Yes, they're all training sessions, but you can tell from the protocol, some have a monitor and they're only single blind. Some have no monitor and they're double blind. Okay? So they're all mixed in here. That actually is a reason here, okay? Double blind solo. CRVS3, Nancy, we'll go through all of this. She gets water and all that kind of stuff. This is the same target. She gets lots of rushing water, okay? And she says, impression of the target was lots of fast-moving water. It was noisy, it appears to be hot and humid there. She didn't say there, but that's what she meant. There's vegetation around, it gives the feeling of excitement and a lot of movement, okay? That waterfall definitely does that, doesn't it? Okay, and here's Nancy. Here's another one, 2002, blind monitored. She kept getting this spiraling thing, and she couldn't figure out why. Whoops. Not only was it spiraling, but it involved lots of water. Water involved in it, or some kind of fluid. She has this interesting thing, fish, fish, fish. I don't know what she was getting at there. Sketches, trying to capture it, still a spiraling thing. Let's see, I did write this up. Here, I'll let somebody else read that. I'm getting hoarse. Your turn.
The target is a liquid flowing, moving, flowing, making spirals, convolutions, and there is something that produces a sucking down motion. There is a white and a whooshing noise. This material is contained in something solid that determines the shape of its contents.
Okay, which is pretty good. Mirella is from Italy, and so she was struggling to get the right words for what she wanted here. And here's the target. You see why she was stuck on the spiraling stuff, the whooshing sound, the white, and of course there's a big pump in the bottom of that, which does make whooshing, sucking kinds of sounds. Okay? And you can see the spiral together with the thing. It is very definitely spiral sort of a structure. You can come down this way, the water comes around, it's stacked and layered down. Okay? There's Morella. This was Nathan. This one's a short one. Count your blessings. Here's his target. You can see his sketch. He describes the structure on Green Hills. In fact, let's see, I think we have, here's a summary. I think that's readable. Why don't you let her read that?
I can see. Target is a walled, I'm not sure I can read this, structure with a slender, tall structure within. The slender structure is
triangularly.
What is it? Triangularly shaped at the bottom. The complete structure is dark gray, stoned, and old. It is hazy, misty, foggy gray. There are hills around the structure, green rolling hills. It is windy, and the
sound of the roaring wind.
The sound of the roaring wind gives me the impression of a fortress, castle, or watchtower.
So what is it? What would you say? Just one word, quick. That's what the target was. Green Hills, castle, slender, triangularly shaped. It's conical, but he thought it was triangular. There's your sketch comparator. There's Nathan. Okay, here's another one by Nancy. This is a double-blind solo. I'm going to run through this one very quickly because there's some more important ones to get to. You can see her sketch. She got an idea of swirling or going around, but she didn't know how to integrate that into the sketch. Okay, impression of the target is several structures with one main structure, stone-like, and one may have a tunnel. She thought she saw a tunnel through it. Feels like a hot or warm climate, much activity, abundant vegetation. There's the target. She didn't get the windmill part of it, but you can see she was getting signal data out of it. There's Nancy. Okay, CRV 3, 2001, Barbara. Okay, ideogram is interesting in this one. She's got an urban landscape with buildings. That's her target. This was before 9/11, but not much before. I pity the student I had who I gave, this is a take-home target on September 10th, 2001. He never did the session. Probably, thank goodness. Okay, I don't have a picture of Barbara. Sorry, I wasn't able to find one. Okay, La Vida. We're going to go through this one quickly. This is 97, I think. Okay, here's the results. There's the feedback. You can compare them. And there's La Vida with her husband, Gene. I don't like how you're standing over there, Bill. Okay.
That's the intention, Paul.
Okay. All right, so here's another one. I'll cut through this one too. You see this interesting, you've got, basically if you read the words, you have a large solid landform with some kind of structure perched on top of it. Inside that structure is a chapel-like thing. There's these seats out here, there's this thing back here, and I put this up here. I gave it away again, didn't I? Okay, anyway. Okay, there's the target. I hope I got a comparison here. Yeah, so you can see that is a chapel. That's a monastery in Greece. There is a chapel up there. And there's the viewer. Okay, 98. Angela. Where's Angela? This is her. Okay, cut through this. She gets this idea of water with a pointed cone-shaped feature in it. We won't read her summary now. And that's the target, which I thought was pretty darn good when I saw it. This was double-blind solo. Now here is the thing I really wanted to get to, and if we don't have time to do anything else, I want to point this out. I'm going to show you two more sessions against the same target that were done years apart. All double-blind solo by different viewers. There's Angela. Here's the same target by Robert. Whoops. Well, you can see what he got. Let me go back once so you know I'm not leaving anything out. That was a session. It was very short. He says targets land and water and trees. Reminds me of a lake in the mountains. Anybody been to Crater Lake? That's a pretty good description. There's his sketch, okay? Here's a third one. Oh, there's Robert, sorry. Here's a third one by Jose. Okay, he gets this ideogram, very interesting. He goes through a whole bunch of stuff, all involving mountains and water and stuff like that. His summary is a natural place in the mountains with water, essentially. Okay, I don't know why I have it in here twice, but you get the idea. He's got this peak thing. He's got this stuff going around the back and around the front. Now, this is his stuff too. Ideogram. This is Robert's sketch. This is one of Angela's sketches. 3 sessions done years apart, double-blind, solo, and they get remarkably similar results. Now, to me, that's pretty darn good evidence that this stuff works. This counts as anecdotal. This is not statistically evaluable, at least individually. But when you start getting these kinds of things corroborating each other, that's pretty powerful evidence, it seems to me. Okay, what's next? That's Jose. Okay, do you want to see the rest of these, or do we need to wrap it up?
Wrap it up.
You got to speak up.
Wrap it up. Wrap it up.
Oh, we're going to have a riot. Okay, let me cut. I'll go through real quick to get to the end slide and give you my conclusion. And you may see some interesting things as we go. This one, okay. This target reminded the person of the Alamo, sand, hot desert fighting in Spanish. And it was. The Battle of the Alamo was the target. Okay, that was Levita again. This is another one from Joseph. Here you see his feedback and his results. Okay, another one from Morella. This was quite interesting. That was the target. I don't have a comparator, I guess. Here's another one. This is another one of those cases where a couple of viewers did the same thing years apart, and they come up with similar results. This one was yours. This is Lawrence. Notice his ideogram. Now, he ended up turning this into a urban scene, but you can see that he had the idea. He was on the target, okay? And there's Lawrence, hard at work, looking frazzled. Okay, here's another from Robert, same target. Look at that one. And he even got the idea there's something down. I think he was remote viewing the picture here instead of the target, but he did a good job. He's got all this stuff, loose material and all that stuff, matches what's down here. Plus, he's got a really good representation of the target. Okay, here's one from Bill. This was another castle, Wartburg Castle, and you can see he was onto something here too. Okay, there's Bill. Another one from Robert. We're getting close. Okay, that was the target. There's his response. There's Robert again. This one I think we have to take time for. Who's a good reader, fast but clear? Dick, come here, run, quick. We have the perfect candidate to read this summary.
The target is a structure that is rectangular, dark, dense, with thick walls. It is windowless and resembles black marble. The structure is a new building that stands upright with the height greater than the width and depth. Inside the structure or building, there are people working in cubicles doing related activities. It is a government facility related to military operations. The people are interested, intrigued, and searching for something. Some people are bored with their work. They are reading documents. The people who work there synthesize information from a lot of different sources and on different topics from all over the world. They are gathering information from satellites, information on world events, political uprising, weather, and putting it together in classified reports. One of the reports is a summary of events in world hotspots such as the Middle East, China, etc. The reports include information on food supplies, population census data. They are composites of data and facts in order to predict future events used in scenario planning and actions for deployment. Couldn't they get some specific data, Paul?
Glenn, what's this target? What's this target? Based on that descriptor, what's this target? National Security Agency. That viewer scared the daylights out of me. She did way better than I thought she was going to do. I'm out of the picture here, aren't I? Sorry. It was exceptionally good work on her part. And that was Roseanne. Never worked for the government in her life. Okay. Tom, this is Tom McNair, dates from 1984. Ingo was the monitor on this one. And this was to show you how sessions got put together. Then he did this model. Some of you may have seen this. That was the target. So you see the two of them together. Don't have time to really talk much in detail about that. Tom is the only one with a mustache besides Ingo. That's Tom. There's Ingo. Me, Bill, much younger and equally handsome. Ed Dames, Charlene, then Kavanaugh, now Schufelt. Here's another one Tom did. Here's one Levita's husband Gene did. I don't have the session, but I have a picture of his final outcome. That's the target. Pretty good job. This is Gene now with his wife instead of her with him. Okay, so here's the bottom line. Why do I say exceptional evidence instead of extraordinary proof? The reason is, first, there is no such thing as proof in science. There's only evidence. There's only proof in mathematics. The second thing is, as remarkable as these things are that you've seen briefly here, it's still not the extraordinary proof science is looking for because it doesn't integrate into the context of science yet. But I would say this goes beyond just average, mundane, everyday evidence. I think this stuff is exceptional evidence. And that's why I'm going to present it to you. So that's why I'm saying we have exceptional evidence to extraordinary claims, and one day, soon, I hope, we'll have extraordinary evidence for those extraordinary claims. And with that, you can go to lunch. Thank you very much.